Hello, everyone, and welcome to Seriously Loco, the Seriously Crazy fan podcast for El Paso Locomotive FC. I'm your host, Phil Bakke, and I'm joined tonight by my co-host, Mikka Burrell. Mikka, good weekend, all things considered. I mean, Locomotive side, or on the Locomotive side, it's obviously been a good weekend, but how's your weekend been otherwise?
It has been a good weekend, yeah, absolutely. Another Locomotive win, 5 games unbeaten. I mean, the Locomotive are the shining beacon in my personal sports fandom right now, which is kind of funny considering how we started. But it's been a decent weekend. I really can't complain too much. I got a margarita on hand. It's like summer already, Phil, in El Paso, so yeah. It felt appropriate to have a little marg on deck.
No, that sounds lovely. What sort of temps are we rocking with down there? We're up in the 90s.
So yesterday it was reasonable, like 70s, 80s. Today it got up to 93. So,
and we aren't quite out of April yet. That is tough to take.
Yeah, so how's your weekend been though?
It was good. The weather's been kind of crappy, to be quite honest. It's been raining up here in the north. But yeah, I guess for those who know, it was my wedding anniversary this week. And so yesterday, like, we took the opportunity to celebrate, even though our anniversary was on Wednesday. It's like we were able to get a babysitter, etc. And we went to a place here in Toledo. Well, I guess the place is called Bellwether, but it's attached to Toledo Spirits, which is a distillery that makes their own various. They have like gins, vodkas. They have a little like whiskey distillery as well, and they have a brewery that they're now doing. Anyways, it's still a cool little spot, but they do these like rotational sort of seasonal menus. And so they just launched their spring menu. So we went down there. They have like all these different cocktails like for spring specifically. And this season they're doing a specifically like East Asian like menu, nice, both on the food and the cocktails. So good. Just like they had bao, like various different fillings in the bao. And then they had, we just had some good, like, just some pork belly, that was like glazed in, unagi and like other stuff. Oh man. Yeah. Just really, really good. Enjoyed the good food, the good drinks, and a little bit of a celebration, there. So yeah, it was a good weekend all in all.
Well, cheers to that, man. Happy anniversary to you and Erica.
Thank you.
8 years? 9 years?
9 years.
9 years.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
Yeah, 2014.
Wow.
So yeah.
Cheers.
Thank you. Yeah. My for those who like anniversaries, there's different like gifts or whatever for the different years. 9 years is pottery. So Erica, being the wordplay artist that she is, got me a Harry Potter themed card and said, "This is your pottery gift." Yeah. So, anyways, nice. Still having fun, still crazy after all these years, as the song says. But yeah, I guess for those finding Seriously Loco, just to get some admin out of the way, we've got our podcasts on all the big podcast platforms. So check them out, like, subscribe, follow along, whatever you prefer. And we're also on all the social media that you could possibly want. And I promised last episode that I would get back on Patreon. That was a lie. It was determined that was a lie. So I will be getting back on Patreon this week, actually. The work schedule, I don't know what it is about spring, but it's like on your side of things, it's been crazy. It's been crazy on my side of things. Yeah. And yeah, anxiety levels have just been high. So I got to create space for the creativity. But yeah, so check us out. Yeah, today we got a big episode, a lot of well, not a lot of, but like a handful of listener questions we got sprinkled in throughout the discussion of a big 3 points that Locomotive locked down in San Diego. Talk a little bit about some of the kind of the news around, obviously we'll talk about the performance itself. We'll talk about some stuff that went down in the game, and we'll talk about kind of the implications as we're trying to evaluate this Locomotive team at large. And then we'll talk about a Friday night game in Colorado Springs, already our second and final game against the Switchbacks. And we'll preview that one for you at the end of the episode. But the Seriously Loco match review. Mikka, I mean, diving straight in to recapping this game against San Diego Loyal, El Paso Locomotive come out 2-1 winners on the night. Just want to get your general impressions of this. I mean, I think like the headline news here is big away wins have kind of been tough to come by, not just like recently for Locomotive, because obviously they're adding some pretty big names to the hit list in terms of away victories. But in Locomotive history, like we haven't typically been a very great team on the road. Like we've more so performed in the friendly confines of the SWUP, and 3 points against a team second in the West that started the season as well as Loyal did. This feels like a big step in the right direction for Claire Hout and the boys. Absolutely.
And I think add on to that we were in California, which is a notable death spiral area for us, if that makes any sense at all. That's just the first thing that came to my mind. It's obviously a huge scalp. I mean, clearly it's not a fluke because we did the same thing in Louisville, another big scalp. And yeah, like you said, this is not something that we're used to as Locomotive fans, and not something that I would wager the players are used to necessarily. I mean, we're definitely a team that thrives at the SWUP for myriad reasons that we could get into, but it's hard not to be pleased with what we saw. I think the performance wasn't like vintage Locomotive by any means, and I think we'll actually get into that as well, about how this team has many faces, contains multitudes, if you will. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, what Brian always says and what his players tend to say too is it's just about the 3 points. And we come away from San Diego with all three. So I'm pleased, to say the least.
Yeah, I think calling out the California thing is really just a great point, because it's not been a happy hunting ground for Locomotive in the Bear Republic. I think in terms of how this one went down, it's different from a couple of the big wins and in this winning streak, or sorry, this unbeaten streak, I should say, since Louisville. It was a little bit different in that it wasn't, I don't know that Locomotive even necessarily like deserved to win at the end of the game, like strictly in like chances created and all those sorts of things. But it's encouraging and the sign of a very good team. I know this is like a trotting out just an old top football man cliche, but the fact that, really good teams find ways to win even when they're not at their best. And there were a couple of signs in this one, particularly in responding to adversity, and responding in particular to San Diego's equalizer with a goal of their own, that just felt different than in the past, where I feel, especially last season, this team, even in games where they went ahead, had the tendency to, that first punch that they took, they really struggled to like maintain their focus, maintain their mentality. They would get frustrated easily. They'd start committing a lot of fouls. And it would kind of like spiral out of control. On more than one occasion last year, I can think of where games just kind of got away from us after that first setback. And so it was really nice to see the squad respond in a way to adversity where they see it out. And it was a little bit by the skin of their teeth, maybe relying a little bit on some poor finishing from San Diego as well. But in the end, this is the sort of game where you are going to have to ride your luck a little bit on the road against a really good team.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is the first time this season where we have had to respond to adversity on the road, like straight away. Because, I mean, in Louisville, we never fell behind, right? I mean, we were pretty much in control of that tie, for reasons we've discussed in the past. But with this one, I mean, you could absolutely see it going downhill. Locomotive sides of old have tended to shrink, like violets under pressure. And it always felt like if we conceded first, then that was more often than not our undoing on the road. So am I going to sit here and say I didn't feel like we might do that once San Diego equalized? I mean, yeah, I have my doubts for sure. And then the entire team puts together this really amazing team goal. And it's funny, Phil, because I was thinking about what you said last time we spoke about how I promised the listeners 15 minutes on Petrovic's goal. And it's like, well, how many minutes do we dedicate to this one? Because it is so different from that finish, but equally as beautiful. And that's kind of where I was getting at the top of the show, is like, in responding to the equalizer on the road, we saw a side of Locomotive that we haven't seen mentally, but also like Brian Clearhout is putting out like what looks like a different team depending on the situation every time. Yeah. I'm confident saying we've never seen this before in Locomotive's history. We had Mark Lowry, who was very wedded to his way of playing that 4-4-2 diamond, more or less, or a 4-3-3. Hutchinson never played anything but a 4-3-3, let's be honest. I mean, he might change it here and there, but depending on game state, but we always started that way. I mean, last week's beautiful goal was a ball over the top. This week's beautiful goal is like a 13-pass move or something like that. I mean, right? Like, we are just seeing this team do so many different things to win. And it's incredible.
I'm in no way like a sports psychologist or mental health professional in any sort of way, but I do think something like you talking about the flexibility of the team and like as it relates to their mental resilience, it almost feels like there is something there in that there isn't just a set plan where, hey, this is the way we play every single game, and we know like this is the system we use and this is how we approach every single game. And when that doesn't work, like there's a fragility to that, because it's like, no, this is the plan. Like this is the one plan that we have. Whereas like this team adapts so much to the situation in front of them that it feels like it builds in almost a level of like mental resilience for the players, because they're like, yeah, hey, we talked about if this happened, like we talked about this potentially happening, and like we know what we need to do to like fix it, or and that there is no set plan in the sense that they know how they're going into the game, but they know that plans change, plans are fluid, like, and we game plan as best we can, but at the end of the day, like you have to respond in the moment. And yeah, I guess like I'm making this like connection between like how we approach games tactically and the flexibility that we give the players in terms of how we're going to set up, and their own like mental resilience in the game state, because it feels like that is happening this year, where they are responding to challenges because we're not so set in our ways.
And I think the thing that we have to recognize about that too is that, this team has changed a lot personnel-wise. So, I mean, take a player like Dennis Kostishin, who's been just fantastic to start his career here at Locomotive. He doesn't have that scar tissue of Central Valley Fuego, of Sacramento Republic. You know what I mean? Like, there are players in and around this squad that don't have those memories. Yeah. So I do think, while that is an overly simplistic way of looking at it, I do think that plays into it a little bit because they don't have to say, oh, here we go again. Like, there is no again. Like, you're new here.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So I'd like to think that the turnover in the squad has helped us get out of those, like, pain patterns, if you will.
Yeah.
So,
well, I mean, the way this one started off, obviously, you know, I think we've become, I would say we're starting to become accustomed to the fact that in games where Locomotive knows that they're not going to be dominant in terms of possession or anything like that, they're comfortable like letting the other team have the ball, which again, not something that we're like super used to. And an area like I would say in the past, that's not something we've seemed super comfortable with. But this game had sort of a predictable pattern to it in a certain way, because the game starts, and while San Diego do enjoy like a bulk of the possession early on, it is Locomotive who open the scoring. And there's a lot of luck in how Ricardo Zacarias' goal comes about, in the sense that like it is, I can't really tell if he's actually shooting or crossing or like what he's actually like trying to pull off, but it's one of those where you kind of, you know, fortune favors the bold, and like he gets into a good area, strikes the ball cleanly, and like whether it's on target, off target, whatever, like he gets a deflection that is friendly, and the ball finds its way into the back of the net. But having a moment like that, it feels like a reward for, you know, we've talked about maybe Zacarias not in terms of finishing ability and like maybe technical ability. We've talked about, hey, is he like the, you know, top of the charts in that respect for Locomotive? No. But he does often like find himself in these good areas, and he kind of makes his own luck here.
definitely. And I think that was something that Locomotive keyed on in the first half pretty much straight away, is that pocket of space of Joe Corona, Perez, and Kyle Adams, that kind of like triangle that they were forming out on their left side, our right. There was that space to be exploited time and time again. And yeah, the ball deflecting that way is absolutely lucky, but as you said, him getting into the space is not. That was where we were finding our joy, and actually Joe Corona gets a card and is hooked at the half, so that's check one Claire Hout former charge gone. And I think Perez gets carded too, and then of course Adams, you know, by far had the toughest day I think in San Diego's back line. So, you know, credit to Ricky for getting into those spaces. Especially because he seemed to kind of be the spare man, at least early doors, because it was like 3 people like trying to haul Lucho down at any given time, and he was pretty frustrated about that, as one can imagine. So, it looked like he was trying to go across the keeper, because I don't know necessarily if there was anyone like obviously waiting for the cross. I can't really remember, but yeah, I mean, sometimes the bounces go your way, and we'll take that all day.
And yeah, you mentioned the booking to Corona. Obviously, we'll talk about, there's a handful of bookings in this one, the way that it ended up playing out. The first half actually got like a little bit spicy, in the sense that Corona and Guido are both booked for Loyal. Calvillo gets booked for Locomotive, and then Claire Hout also finds himself in the book before the end of the first half. Yeah, there's a alternate universe where the refereeing in this one is actually more scrutinized. I think like Locomotive's result probably papered over some of the like rougher parts of the performance. I thought overall maybe a little quick on the booking trigger in weird contexts, and then not quick to book like when it was almost more obvious, like, or like a worse tackle, I guess.
Yeah, I feel that she was, like you said, quick initially, like, okay, gonna stamp my authority on this game and book folks in rapid succession. I mean, Eric Calvillo gets one early, the ones you just mentioned, but then after that it was like, I think there's another foul on Eric Calvillo that was like a clear like boots through the back of him, and actually it leads to San Diego chance, which if that had gone in, I would have been screaming like my head off. The refereeing was a little weird, and like in the theme overall of like spiciness. Even the referee gets injured in this one, so it was a weird one.
Yeah, very strange. But Locomotive grabbing the goal early on the road, it felt important in the moment, and I would say it proved to be important because it does shape like much of what goes on in the rest of the game, and we can talk about that a little bit more. But the if the goal was a high, a sort of immediate balancing low comes in just 2 minutes later. Marc Navarro goes down injured, and he's replaced by Miles Lyons, which is not a negative in and of itself with Miles. Like, Miles has obviously played quite well, and I think, again, he has a pretty good night and is actually involved pretty heavily in the build up to the second goal. But Marc Navarro going off, and we had a question from a good friend of the pod, Eric Bauer at eBow27 on Twitter. Am I crazy that I am very concerned with Navarro and it looking like he'll struggle to be consistently available for us? Any idea if he aggravated the injury he had before, or if it was something new that caused him to come off early? I'm not sure if we have info on the injury itself, but anything we could glean from the the footage, I guess. And then the second point, or his first question being, is it crazy to start to question Navarro's availability, even though it is like still really early in the season, all things considered?
I mean, if you're crazy, then I'm crazy, because I wrote 1,000 words about how Marc Navarro is injury prone, and that will be the big question mark.
Yeah.
Wrong punctuation. Over this signing, right? I mean, this was the marquee signing. And I mean, I think here's where we have to also be a little bit realistic. Why is a player like this, with this resume, playing in USL Championship? Right? I mean, his last professional team was in La Liga, or at least in Segunda, right? Like a very, very, very high, one of the best leagues in the world. To take a year and a half off and then come to USL Championship, I mean, kudos to whoever identified him and swayed him to come here, obviously, but that is an opportunity that presents itself precisely because of this injury history.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, we just have to put that out there. Like,
yeah, no one's moving from like La Liga promotion contender to USL Championship, like, for competitive reasons. Like, and I don't.
No, I mean,
that is no shade to the league. That's just the reality. Like, if I have a chance to play against Barcelona, Real Madrid, like, I'm probably not going to move. If I feel like I have a shot, I'm not going to move from that situation. And it was really because, like, his chance at that was gone. Like, I think we can say that confidently.
Yeah, and I mean, it is a concern. It is a concern. And I think the thing that is also concerning in the context of this is, I mean, we kind of glossed over the fact that Marc Navarro started this game. He was healthy enough for the bench against Pittsburgh after that 2 weeks where we didn't play a game. And I think thinking back, hindsight, I mean, 2020, I say, but I'm still speculating at this point. It was put to us that even with that 2 weeks, his chance of playing in Pittsburgh or against Pittsburgh was like less than 25%. That's what it was told to us. So now I start to think, well, did we rush him back, or was he not quite fit? And I can understand the temptation if that's the case. I'm not saying it is. We don't know. But, he's the big signing. I mean, and he is impactful, to be honest. Like, he's one of the best players in the team. But, yeah, I mean, in this game, it looks to be, I mean, 1 minute he's moving fine, the next he's on the ground. So, clearly a non-contact injury, which you hate to see. Correct me if I'm wrong, Phil. I don't think anyone had, like, clattered into him or anything. He kind of just went down.
No. Yeah, it didn't look like it, which is obviously concerning for a guy coming off of an injury, and with his history, like, any non-contact injury is really concerning.
Yeah,
I think
he's spent over 400 days out with injury in his career, so a year and change. I mean, that's significant, and it's this hamstring, really, because his last major injury, like, I think with Watford, maybe it was also a hamstring, and this time he had that left hamstring was kind of pulling at him a little bit too. So it's just, it sucks for sure.
Yeah. I think the concern, and I guess to put to put a real stamp on it, yet no, Eric, you're not crazy for being concerned about it because it is there's a history and a reputation for a reason, unfortunately, with Mark. And I think the fact that like he plays through the Louisville game and then it's like, like he's got this kind of nagging thing, fitness issue, whatever, and then misses 3 games. Like, and it's not just like, because at first it was kind of the way it was marketed was obviously, oh yeah, like it's a precaution. He's not going to Tulsa. Like, and so it reminds me of and the whatever. I always have a Liverpool comparison, but it reminds me of Daniel Sturridge, in that he would often have these like, oh, it's just like a little knock or he felt something, and like he'll be out for a little bit, and then you wouldn't see him for like 2 months, and then eventually like he would be back and he'd make a sub appearance and then inevitably be like hurt again, and the whole thing, like it was just this never ending cycle of like fitness issues. And the unfortunate thing is like the signs are there that this is going to continue to be a problem, and like we've mentioned in the past, I think the real concern is like what happens if Miles Lyons gets hurt. Like, because Artem Kholod like hasn't really played much, like hasn't seen like I think he played in Omaha. Is that the extent of his
came on and,
involvement?
To be honest, had a shocker in a few minutes of time.
Yeah. So there's a lot of question marks there. I don't think question marks. So anyways, I just, it is tough, but I really do think that there's reason to be concerned. And hopefully like they're able to manage him through this injury. But I think it's safe to say that, whether it was the player pushing to like get back into involvement and like insisting that he was fine, or whether it was the coaching staff like wanting to like, hey, I think we're good, let's test him. Obviously when a player goes off 15 minutes into a game, like someone's gotten it wrong. Like, when it's like a non-contact muscle injury. And if it was something, where it was related to something that happened in the game, then obviously like I'm willing to be wrong. And hopefully it's something, if it was something related to a contact, but,
I mean, you always have your Liverpool comparison, but I think it's apt to bring Liverpool Football Club up because at one point Marc Navarro was being scouted by Liverpool. I mean, this just shows you the heights he could have reached if his body, didn't betray him so often, and that's really sad. I mean, obviously, I'm thrilled that he's with Locomotive, but
of course,
it just to put into perspective, like those were the kind of clubs that were looking at him. I mean, when you're able to get a result against Lionel Messi, peak Lionel Messi, Barcelona in the Cup, like some decent results in the Premier League too, like it's he was well on his way to being a very, very good like top level footballer. But it just has not worked out that way, unfortunately. Not due to lack of talent, of course.
Yeah, and unfortunately as well, like USL, while maybe a tier or two below like those in talent level or maybe technical level, intense like physical intensity level is super duper high. So not exactly like the and it's an unfair stereotype these days, but certainly not like old school Italy where it was kind of like this, seen as a league where players could like were not as physically demanded in terms of like what they were doing.
Sure.
In the amount of running and all that sort of stuff. USL, like it is going to be up and down, and certainly in Claire Hout's system for fullbacks, like there are a lot of demands, and rightfully so. But it one to watch certainly, and hopefully,
of course,
hopefully
we will learn anything, we'll keep y'all informed. But at the moment, I don't think they're even back yet. They are traveling back, I think, tomorrow. You can. Eighth Notch was saying that they're meeting the team at 1 p.m. at the airport. So if you hear this by then, by all means, welcome the boys home. But yeah, nothing further on that at this time.
Obviously, we talked about the fact that the goal in this game like impacted how Locomotive played. And I think in particular in the second half, because I will say, like, it did feel like there wasn't a ton of like good looks maybe for either team. Like in the first half, there were maybe a couple of dangerous moments, but nothing like big time. And then in the second half, like with that 1-0 lead, it did start to feel like Locomotive started to drop off a little bit and just like invite a little bit more pressure. And there was this moment where it did feel like we just really weren't putting anything together. Like every single time that we got the ball, we were clearing it. And just not playing as much, you know, I said it at the time, but it feels like we've kind of stopped playing football at a certain point. Do you think that was just like a natural reaction to like, hey, we've got a 1-0 lead on the road, let's just like do our best to batten down the hatches? Or is it something that the team like needs to be cognizant of and try to like not do in the future?
You know, I never got the impression that we were trying to pack it in for the night. I didn't get that vibe at all. This is where I have to give credit to San Diego Loyal. I think that their manager probably gave them a bullocking, as they say, at halftime, and said that that's just 1,000% not good enough. You know, and given the context, we know they went to 120 plus minutes against Seattle Sounders in a valiant U.S. Open Cup effort, but ultimately falling short with most of their starters. So, I mean, I suppose they could be forgiven for being a little bit tired, but I think that they actually raised their level in the second half. I don't know it was necessarily us being okay with a 1-0 necessarily. Maybe subconsciously. I guess that's what I'm trying to say, is maybe subconsciously there was a little bit of that, but I would be surprised if Brian had said that's good enough. Like let's what we have we hold. Like I just can't imagine that, right? I mean, I could be wrong, but it didn't feel like that to me. It just felt like San Diego were putting their foot on the ball a little bit more. I mean, we were still shepherding them wide, but they were doing more with that kind of game state. And I think that's why Nick Moon in particular has a really good game for the most part, is he was able to kind of cope better going down the flanks. I think we weren't as touch tight to folks as we were in the first half. I think the press definitely fell off, you know, to your point of like, were we trying to be a little more narrow and conservative in the way that we were defending. I think that did happen. I think they forced us to do that. I think they were just better. And I think Duke Keith actually tweeted at halftime, like, I certainly expect San Diego to be better in the second half because this is just not good enough from them. And maybe they're just shaking off a little bit of the rust, or not the rust, but I mean the fatigue actually from Sounders. So San Diego were better. They were better.
Yeah, no, and I think, I mean, to that point, in the 61st minute, San Diego Loyal, the pressure had been building since halftime. I think it was safe to say that by the time that Moshe Bane scores the equalizer, it felt like we had already not gotten away with necessarily, but it felt like we had already survived a few scares. And it was really just like when that goal went in, there are some goals where you feel that kind of stab of that pain of like, it's, you know, shocking or against the run of play or something like that. This one, it was almost like a resignation of like, yeah, that's been coming for a while.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was written, writing was on the wall with that one because we were just not coping with the pressure. And I think, I mean, like, stats aren't everything, but in this game, I think they are very instructive. For example, let me find it. Clearances. San Diego Loyal made 6. We made 33.
Yeah.
That's like 5 times the clearances that they make. I mean, under the proverbial cosh. And I think a lot of that goes towards the second, like the second half of the second half when we've got the lead, right?
Sure.
And they're like desperately throwing everything at it. But still, even then, 4 blocks to their 1. I mean, just insane, right? Like just the amount of pressure that we came under. And San Diego were wasteful. I mean, Ronaldo Damus, like, his movement was terrorizing Yuma and Bence Pavkovic. Like, he did everything but score in this game. He has that one sitter where we don't quite clear it, and I don't know what happens if he just, like, swings his boot at it or if he just doesn't quite make it there. I just know that it was a sitter, and he absolutely has to do better there. But his movement was fantastic. His touch was letting him down a lot. So, I mean, on another day, maybe a more well-rested San Diego Loyal, I don't know. I mean, their commentators seem to think like we have this luxurious life where we don't play as much as them, but that's neither here nor there. But on another day, maybe the San Diego Loyal takes us to the sword, and we've seen that in the past, right? These are high-scoring fixtures typically. And it wasn't for want of trying. It just would not go in for them. And maybe we need to give a little bit of credit, I guess. I don't like to see us defending, like, backs to the walls. Like, that is just way too much for my heart, to be honest. But at the end of the day, like, we're able to get away with it. And I think Brian will be a little bit annoyed at the quality of chance that we gave up.
Yeah, I mean, we end up conceding, according to Opta, 4 big chances on the night, all of which San Diego did not score. So there is another night in which this is far, far worse. Luckily, they didn't put many of them on target. A couple of them that they did, Benny Diaz was equal to, luckily, and I think Benny has a good night, not a great night. And there was a period of time where I was convinced that he was just like, I was like, please, Benny, catch one of these crosses.
Oh my God. Jeez. Yeah.
Loyal put in 34 crosses, on the night. So they were just peppering it into the box. They did see it as a route to goal. So Moshe Bani gets the equalizer. It had been coming, as we said. It was something that, and I guess like this was the inflection point or the moment in the match where typically I would have said, and I think I even felt this as I was watching the game, like, okay, now it's like, just hold on for dear life and like, let's try to get out of here with a point, right? Like, compared to what we would typically do for Locomotive, because it's like, I've seen this movie before. Like, we've led for a large chunk of the game for the first hour. They get the equalizer, and now they're gonna win 4-1, right? Like, they're like, this is gonna be like we're just gonna get like picked apart now.
This guy Locomotives.
Yeah. And what actually happened is in the 65th minute, Benny Diaz picks up the ball in our own area, rolls it out, and then what happens, Mikka, is 7 Locomotive players touch the ball end to end. Like, I love the fact that this move starts with the goalkeeper because it just demonstrates how intricate, I guess, it is and how good the movement is, how good the passing is, and above all else, how calm every single touch in this move is. And it ends with Dennis Kostichin at the other end calmly, that word coming up again, placing it beyond Coque Vegas into San Diego's net and setting off celebrations. One of those goals that when you're watching it live, like there are some goals that you watch and you yell something out loud while you're watching because it's a like long range strike, or it's it's a curler, it's like from a tight angle, something like that. This I literally shouted, "What a fucking goal!" because of the sequence, like the how it was constructed. So I mean, second week in a row we get to wax lyrical about a goal, but I just like, this was again like another goal of the season contender for Locomotive, but for very different reasons than the one that we talked about last week, as you talked about at the top of the show.
Oh yeah, I mean the finish from Kostichin is beautiful, but I mean it's really about the buildup, as you laid out so well there. San Diego and I have something in common when it comes to this goal. We're both like boiled frogs watching it, because it's, by the time you realize you're about to get killed, it's too late. It's too late. And that's when Lucho kind of one time passes it into Kostichin's, he makes that like shimmy move and it's real quick, and the play just speeds up like exponentially at that point. That's when you're like, oh, this is bad. This is really bad from San Diego's perspective, right? But throughout the buildup, like I don't think they sensed at all that they were in trouble.
No.
And I think that's what's just, like we talked about at the top of the show, like this team has so many ways of hurting you. And I think that that's going to be, if we can keep this up, of course, we'll have to see. But I think that's going to be a big question for every USL team going forward, is like, how do you deal with El Paso Locomotive? Because they can go over the top. They can put together this team total football goal. They can hit you on the counter. They can keep the ball. I mean, like, we've done everything already in such a short space of time. And I think, that goes back to the conversation we had with Brian when we said, what really is your philosophy? And he didn't talk about formations. He didn't talk about players necessarily. He talked about control. And in this moment, like, you see, like, in this moment and in the season so far, you've seen what control looks like in various different ways. And that's what we did. We wrestled control back from San Diego and momentum back from San Diego almost immediately. I think the goal comes, 4 minutes after Mushabane's equalizer, and we just, like, it really did feel like a flip switch, which, like, that's both good and bad, because I kind of tweeted, look what happens when we play football, right? Like, that was the first, like, quality move that we put together in the second half, and it ended up in a goal. So while I can praise the quality of that, I think the flip side too is like more of that, right?
Right.
More of that, put people to the sword earlier if we can.
Sure.
And then maybe think about defending the width of your penalty area.
Right. Well, and it took a little bit of a, I don't know if it was mentally, because they're, again, like, pulling out the old cliches. It's like, is it one of those moments where we latch on to San Diego? Maybe San Diego felt something more akin to what I felt in the moment when Moshabane scored, which was they've been well on top. Like, San Diego's been well on top since at least halftime.
Yeah.
This could just be the start for them in terms of like goals from here on out. And I think San Diego almost feel that too, where they're like, man, we have been in control. We've been camped out in their half for the last 15 minutes. And they get the goal. There's a little bit of a pressure release from like, and that sense of urgency, like, just goes out of San Diego just the slightest bit to allow, like what you're saying, which is they have this, they don't know that they're in trouble until they're already dead. Like, and that's the, like, and that is like, I think Locomotive seized on that. But to your point, like, how does Locomotive create moments like this and create sequences like this when they're like before that pressure release? Like, how do they create that at 1-0? And manage this like while they are under pressure. Not to say that they weren't, and I think like that is like the beauty of the goal for me in many ways, is that they do this having just conceded an equalizer, which speaks to that resilience and everything that we're talking about. But it's like, how do we create, like, how does this team create more of those moments where they're able to flip this switch before the concession of that equalizer?
Absolutely. That's certainly the question going forward. And I think, like, I'm it bears repeating, I think, is just like the many different ways that we've hurt opponents in this 5-game run. I think if you're listening to this and you know, you're not really like a tactics nerd, what I would say to those of you who maybe watch the game a little more casually, which there's nothing wrong with that, I would say watch Lucho Solaniak.
Mm-hmm.
Just watch him for a game and then watch him at the next game and see how different his role is. It's almost comical what we're asking this guy to do, which is everything. Because in this game, he's like the second coming of Antoine Griezmann, like a playmaker, essentially. Like more of what we're used to, I think, from Lucho. Like,
sure,
dropping off a little bit, making that space, making the defender say, like, do I go with him? Do I not? Like, now there's a space opening up behind me. What do I do? Lays it off. You know, he gets the assist for Kostishin. So, you know, case in point. But against Pittsburgh, he was running the channels like a straight up, like, old school number 9. Like, that's what I would say. If you want to see what we're talking about, just watch Lucho Solaniak. Watch, like, what he's being asked to do from game to game. Like, and it's just so impressive, too, because of a player of his age. Not that he's old or anything, but, I mean, he has, what, in his 30s now? 29, 30?
Yeah, he's right on maybe 31?
31 sounds right. But, I mean, my point being, like, it's amazing that Brian Clarehout has convinced a player...
32 now.
32. Has convinced a player of his experience to do all these different things. You know, a lot of players are set in their ways. And I think actually when we were kind of transitioning away from like Mark Lowry's core, that was kind of like a theme that we saw. Like it was put to us that like there were a couple players that were set in their ways and we needed to evolve the club. And so Lucho being one of those remaining players, like to see him in particular like do so many different things for us is really impressive. And, you know, Brian's getting across his message clearly.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean Dennis Kostishin you could talk about in similar terms. Maybe not as far as like Lucho being obviously one of the like really experienced members of the team, and he's been around the block. Kostishin obviously a little bit on the, well, you know, he's closer to his prime, I guess, like in terms of how his development's gone. But Kostishin, both in this goal, but really just overall talking about, last week we were talking about how he dropped back to play like a deep lying playmaker role in like closer to a 6 like area of the field. He's standing, you know, in Bense, like in a center back spot when we're in possession. And then in this goal and in this game in general, he was kind of back out on the wing for large parts of the game. And in the build up to this goal, like Miles Lyons has actually underlapped in a very like Pep Guardiola, you know, you mentioned Pep, very Pep Guardiola, Kyle Walker like deployment of Miles Lyons, who plays the ball to Kostishin, who's on the wing. Kostishin plays the ball infield and then they make an interchanging run where Lyons makes a run back out wide, and Kostishin actually makes an infield run. And it's like in one move and throughout this game, like we've seen Kostishin deployed in like number 10 areas of the field, in those attacking midfield areas. Like we've seen him play as a winger. We've seen him play like as kind of a roving playmaker in central midfield. We've seen him interchange like with Miles a lot in terms of like his positioning versus his fullback, and like one bombing on and the other like staying back. And so we've seen all of these things from him in the first 7 games of the season. Like we've already seen that in 7 games, which again, like speaks to the versatility. And luckily for us, Kostishin is a quite good finisher in the box too, because there's not a lot of players who are comfortable with doing all of that and then one-on-one with a keeper staring him down, like able to keep their composure and slot the ball past a keeper who's having a quite good start to the season in Koke Vegas.
Nice finesse on that. And I just want to say, like, I'm glad that we won. I'm glad we were able to punish San Diego, because I just thought that Koke Vegas at center back was absurd. Like, we get it. You have like a way of playing and you want to keep doing that. But it was just like, it just felt, I don't know how to explain this. Like, it felt like performative after a while. Like, I don't know if that makes any sense at all, but it was like, just 10 net, dude. Like,
Right.
you're already playing a 3 at the back system. Like, what is this? Anyway, That's my rant. But if there's one player who will not stop being a shadow striker, it's Bensei Pavkovits. Went on a couple adventures again. What do you think about that?
I mean, as someone who was a big proponent of the Joel Matip school of center backs, like I'm happy to see a guy go on a few adventures now and then, like Frodo Baggins style. But I think the thing for Bensei is that I think we can all agree that he's a quality center back who has done a good job for us already this season. I think his self-confidence is good in many ways, and I think there's probably a level of like we do need to like throw the leash on every once in a while and like and just get him to understand like game state and like all that sort of stuff where it's like, okay, when is the moment like when this is the right decision? Because I think his confidence in his own dribbling abilities is also like he overestimates his ability to beat players like in those situations where I think like the guys who are good at that, and I actually like, I mean, there are a lot of center backs in world football who are good at kind of exploiting that space that opens up in front of them and like eating up the space in order to create opportunities for other players because they're forcing someone to close them down. The key is like getting rid of the ball before the risk of losing it becomes too high, because once you lose it, now you're screwed. Like you can't afford to lose the ball. Like if you lay it off, fine. Like, yeah, you didn't go on this like swashbuckling run that found you like on the edge of the area. That's okay. Like the goal was to get someone to close you down to open up space for someone else. Like you should not be the guy like on the end of the move, if that makes sense. Like if it happens, that's cool. And there's like some novelty to that, but, just understanding more so like what is the goal of me getting forward, because it shouldn't be like I'm trying to get into a position to shoot or something like that. That's not really like it's like I'm eating up space and forcing an opponent to close me down so that I'm creating like more space, especially against teams that like defend deep or something like that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in this one it doesn't hurt us, but
no,
he did go for some adventures again, and it's kind of funny in a way. But then one day it won't be when it causes us to concede. But I do really like him, and I think he's been like the Andrew Fox replacement that we needed. So
yeah, he's so far he's just missing a set piece goal,
right?
Which I'm sure he will eventually get. He's had some good looks, like not in this game in particular, because I think Locomotive just had a very low amount of. Like actual set piece opportunities, but the interesting thing in this one, we talked about Loyal created a lot of good chances, including like 4 Opta-defined big chances, and obviously up 2-1 on the road, like they're trying to close it out, see things out, and there were a few changes like through this one that prompted a question from @NickGo11 on Twitter. He just asked, thoughts on the formation change to close out games. Does the change to a back 5 late in games mean we need another center back, not just a depth option, but maybe a left-footed center back?
Left-footed center back is always a good thing to have, because not just for the formation change, but just so that you can have that passing angle, because it is important, right? And we had that last season. We had 2 actually in Andrew Fox and Martin Payares. So, yeah, I mean, I think in this one it's a little more obvious that we went back 3, because I think actually more often than not it's more of like a 4-4-2 out of possession. In this one we go 3. I don't know that it necessitates a center back, because when that fullback drops, and in this one, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's actually Borelli who becomes like that third center half. I think it's more about like just make sure that you maraud that space, right?
Yeah.
And then at the same
McHugh gets like kind of lobbed back there too, because I don't think we actually replace. Yeah. So they bring on McHugh for Zacharias, which he goes back into central defense, which then it's like a 5 basically with Borelli, McHugh, Pavkovitz, Yuma, and Lyons. But
yeah, so I mean, whoever is gonna drop, like, I don't know that. Just to protect like a lead, I don't think it's like, oh my god, this player can't do this. You know what I mean? We actually, I feel like that's actually kind of becoming like a trend right now, actually, of like fullbacks playing as center halves to varying degrees of success. To be fair, I mean, I think Ben Davis is doing it at Spurs. Marc Cucurella, like really weird, doing it at Chelsea. Not great, but he did it at Brighton and it was fine.
Sure.
So, I mean, just some examples from the top of the game, but a left-footed center back would be great. I mean, we could always use more. That's kind of my answer. I'm sorry if I'm all over the place. We could always use more. And Christian asked Brian about that, and he was pretty coy, as we discussed last time, but it seems like he's open, certainly he must be, to augmenting this squad. But I think I think the formation change to the 3-back was... I think it's actually a response to San Diego, to be honest. But yeah.
Do you think it's a change that it's something the shift in formation always makes me a little bit nervous. Only because I've seen in the past, this is me bringing more Liverpool trauma into the mix. Klopp always used to make this change of adding an extra center back, and it would always mean that there would be more like pressure, but I guess in this case, with us switching to this like back 3, back 5, whatever you want to call it, like with that switch, do you think it's been effective in like closing out game, like, or in this one, there are a couple of moments where it feels we ride our luck a little bit, but do you think it like is getting the job done? Because I mean, on the results sheet, you would say, yeah, for sure. Do you think it's something that we should stick with?
I think it's a trade-off. I can certainly understand the temptation and the logic of like throw on another center back, especially someone who's, tall and can head the ball away, presumably, and just backs to the wall, defend the width of the area, defend the penalty area. It's effective in that, like, we kept clearing the ball out, to be fair. I think, and I guess Benny Diaz is like half of those. He doesn't catch the ball, but he's very involved in a lot of those clearances. So I guess, like, it was like the end justified the means, but I do think in doing that we've invited more pressure because we've signaled to our opponent that we are done attacking for the night. Actually, I think Christian put it that way in our group chat. Actually, it was like, oh wow, so like I guess we're done. And it's like, yeah, I guess so. So yeah, like the end kind of like makes you think the means is working, but it's like, well, how much? I guess it's up to you, dear listener, like how much cardiac arrest can you take? But yeah.
I did want to give a shout out to Martin Payadas, who is now plying his trade at Tigres FC in the Colombian second tier. So he went back home.
Nice.
Seems to be playing like consistently for them. So shout out to Martin. Glad he's found his spot. Because I know it was probably a frustrating stay in El Paso, to be honest. Like, yeah, for him. There are a couple of moments late on in this one where I was absolutely convinced that we were going to concede, and I actually tried to reverse jinx in the group chat by saying, like, can we just concede and put me out of my misery? Because we were like really, really under pressure. And watching the highlights back, there is a moment in the 82nd minute where Benny, like, it is one of those moments where he kind of palms away across, like, straight onto the boot of a loyal player who, gratefully for everyone involved, Benny most of all, like, kicks it straight at Benny's chest and just like, and it deflects away, luckily. But I was like, this is the moment, like, soft, not dealing with the cross, like not punching it away really effectively or catching it. It's just like one of those typical moments. But I will give a quick shout for late on Emmanuel Sinupe. It's one of those shots where the like nearly goals of the season. I don't know if you have goals in your mind where, like, from your various teams where or not goals, I guess, like the goals that should have been in a juster and more kinder universe. Something that hit the post or was saved like acrobatically or something like that. This goal in particular from Manny, or this what would have been just an amazing goal, basically one of the last touches of the game. He picks it up in midfield and just like on the spin, like hits it from about 40 yards. And Koke Vegas like is sprawling to save it and does get a hand to it and turn it behind. If that goes in, that's like we're out in the streets.
Right. Man, is there anyone more deserving of a moment like that than Manny Sinupe? Been through a lot with moving here from England, struggling mightily with injury in his first season, kind of in and out of the squad now with a new manager. I mean, it's just been a lot of change for him and a lot of like uncertainty. But that ball stayed hit. Like, it was not spinning. It was just like trying to knuckle its way past Koke Vegas, and like you said, he makes a good save. I thought actually too, like, Manny's deployment as like an auxiliary fullback was really quite interesting because he's got a lot of pace and like he will work for the side, and so I liked that. I think it's not what we necessarily like want to see from him. Like we think he's very much an attacking talent, but I mean, if he wants to be involved with the team and that's what the manager's asking him to do, then by all means he did it. So here's hoping that is more regular, that we see Manny a little bit more, because I do think that's a talented player and we want to. I still feel like we're trying to get to know him. We keep seeing these flashes. I just really want him to have his like real like coming out party for Locomotive.
Yeah. No, one of those non-goals that will fade into the mists of history, as so nearly a worldie. But no, hope to see more from Manny, and it is always good to see him get some time. To round out the discussion of this game, and maybe link it back to Locomotive's season, and maybe put some context on this 5-game unbeaten run. Is it now 5 games?
5 games, yeah. In the league,
yeah. At 4pf_Eric on Instagram asked, I don't want to jinx it, but are we actually good now? So, I mean, is it I guess those first few games where Locomotive were winless, we kind of talked about the fact that like it seemed like there were some good things to be optimistic about. And now the results are there to match.
Well, I mean, we spoke about this at the beginning. Is like there was just cohesion missing. It's not like we didn't see that this team had talent, that this manager had ideas that he was trying to get across, and that the players were responding to it. It's just about actually having time to work on these things together. And so we've been able to do that, and lo and behold, the results are turning around a little bit. So I think there are still going to be tests for us, to be clear. On another day, this goes differently. Ronaldo Damos probably has a hat trick, right? But, the results that we can get, even under less than stellar circumstances, we'll take them, obviously. And we'll use that for confidence and to be better and more in control next time. But yeah, I mean, this is a good team. It is a good team. And let's enjoy it, while it's happening, instead of thinking about the next game, the game after that. Like, we can sit and enjoy what we've seen these past couple weeks. And there's just absolutely nothing wrong with that. And I think we're up to, 4th in the Western Conference?
Yeah.
Which is, a pretty tidy place to be, all things considered. I think the disparity between, like, matches played, like, for example, New Mexico and Las Vegas are still only on 6. We've played 8. Like, the table's lying a little bit in that regard.
Sure.
But, we can only play the games that are in front of us, and so far, like, it's a good place to be. I mean, the table does feel pretty fair. I mean, the teams above us have been good. Sacramento, Colorado, now San Diego, San Antonio falling off just a little bit recently, but, they've also played a lot. I don't think they've won in their last 5 or something like that, which is nuts.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a good team, and let's enjoy it. I mean, we were down on them when they're not playing well. Let's bring them up when they're playing very well. So.
No, absolutely. Well, the Locomotive straight back into action on Friday against Colorado Springs in Colorado. And after a quick break, we'll be back to break down a preview of that one. The Seriously Loco match preview. Welcome back to Seriously Loco. Locomotive staring down a trip to Widener Field in Colorado Springs on Friday night, Mikka, and a spot against a team like that is in really good form, has played well so far this season, and has beaten Locomotive already once this season. Last couple of games, they beat New Mexico. They beat Charleston Battery on the road in Charleston. And in fact, they've won 4 of their last 5, and their only loss being the thrashing that they took at the hands of Sacramento Republic. With all of that being said, I mean, what is the vibe ahead of this trip to Colorado Springs? Because while Colorado Springs results feel better than what was predicted for them maybe at the beginning of the season, this is also a quite different Locomotive team than the one that they faced in the season opener at Southwest University Park. So, I mean, what are we looking at here? Is this like, and should Locomotive be confident ahead of their trip to Colorado?
Yeah, I think they should. I mean, we've improved markedly since last we saw these people, and they scored a really just a heartbreaker in the 92nd minute from Duke Lacroix.
Yeah.
I think we should go into this confident. And again, the record against Colorado Springs is still, by and large, very good. Now, of course, we've talked about how the squad is much different now, and they don't have those. Same as they don't have that scar tissue, they also don't have those, like, institutional memories of beating Colorado's ass for the most part. So, I mean,
we simply do not lose to this team.
Right, yeah. Right. So, I mean, I guess there's that. But, I mean, this Colorado Springs team, they can be got at. They don't keep clean sheets, really. Even in some of the wins that they've had, they've managed to concede 1 or 2. I mean, beating Charleston at home is a big thing, but they'll also presumably be tired from that trip. That's quite a ways to go, all the way out to the East Coast. They beat a New Mexico United team that I'm not really convinced by anyway, to be honest.
No.
And I know that that's going to sound like sour grapes or copium, but it is what it is. And then they got shellacked by Sacramento Republic, which they should do. So they're not anyone that we need to fear, right?
Yeah.
I think that first game was obviously a heartbreaker, but it did take them until extra time to beat us. So I think we just need to think about staying switched on the entire time and really taking them to the sword and punishing them early so that if they do pull a rabbit out of the hat, so to speak, that late, it won't matter because we'll already have put the game away. So yeah, nothing to fear, and we should go into this with tons of confidence. And it's a Friday night. What I will say though is that maybe the environs won't be as friendly because it's still pretty freaking cold up in Colorado right now. So I love the content of them bulldozing that New Mexico United snowman, but I'm not trying to be the next snowman. So yeah.
Yeah, I think the message for Switchbacks is the fact that yes, like they have 5 wins to start the season. They are second in the West very unexpectedly. That is on the back of just 9 goals in 8 games, and an even goal difference.
9 conceded.
Yeah. I mean, Sacramento, just one place above them, has a plus 12 goal difference. Jesus. And Loyal, who are a place below them, have a plus 4. We're right behind Loyal with a plus 3. So, like, goal difference isn't everything, but it is, to me, demonstrates, like, what sort of team are you in a broad sense. And I think the fact that they are, like, currently, they've won 5 out of 8 while scoring as many as they conceded, that to me is not sustainable. Because you can't win every single game. Contrary to what San Antonio told us last year, you cannot win every single game 1-0 or 2-1. Like, you can't do that for a whole season. And so I think, like, there's going to be a bit of a regression to the mean at some point in terms of the results. Like you said, I think while there are a couple of, like, interesting results on their record, I would say Colorado Springs has also had a relatively, like, weak schedule. They lost to a San Antonio team that is really struggling to, like, find their footing this year. They beat Loudoun 1-0. They beat Pittsburgh 1-0, which, yeah, I guess so did we, but like, still. And then, as you said, got shellacked by Sacramento, and then 1-goal wins over both New Mexico and Charleston. I do think the Charleston win is like nothing to sneeze at. I would say the question maybe, or I guess the question mark here is, like, how much was Charleston impacted by Open Cup minutes as well? So maybe there's something to that. The bottom line is that, like you said, I don't think Colorado Springs is anything overly intimidating. And I think the concern from a Colorado Springs perspective that I kind of focus on is they have struggled to find, like, who is going to be, like, that guy when it comes to goal scoring. Romario Williams is obviously, like, a bit of a focal point. He has just 2 goals this year. Drew Skundrich, Malik Foster, Duke Lacroix, Steven Echeverria, Jairo Enriquez, and Zach Sandy all have 1. And that is all of their goal scoring in 8 games. So, like, they don't have a big focal point in terms of, like, volume goals. They're kind of relying on, like, everybody to pitch in right now, and it's not super consistent. So, like, my thing is, over the course of the season, like, that's not going to be reliable in terms of getting results. And Locomotive have shown that they are typically able to keep, like, the big volume goal scorers quiet. So I don't know. I like Locomotive's chances at defending well on the road in Colorado Springs.
Yeah, I mean, in Colorado's kind of defense, I guess, they are slightly underperforming their XG, just slightly, maybe by about a goal, whereas we are overperforming ours. And I think, I mean, when you have that open net for Lucho against Pittsburgh, I mean, the deflection that we just saw in San Diego, like, we are getting some bounces, right? And, you take those and XGs and everything, but it is helpful to kind of understand
For sure.
Just like a little bit more context in the goal scoring. And I do think Colorado are seemingly a better side on the road than they are at home for reasons unknown to me. I don't know why that is, but I do think that like if we can go to Louisville and go to San Diego and do what we did, like on paper, Colorado should be light work. Not to say that I'm disrespecting the opponent, but I mean, there's levels to this, right? And so I feel decently good about our chances as well.
Yeah, I am interested too by the fact that and I guess something that stuck out to me about the stats from Colorado Springs win in Charleston is that it felt like Colorado Springs, maybe the biggest thing that they were able to pull off is they got Charleston to try to play a very similar game to them. These teams not only ended exactly 50-50 in possession, they also ended having completed the exact same amount of passes, 287, which I found really, really weird. Like and even in stuff like shots, Charleston has 10, Switchbacks have 11. Charleston had 2 on target, Switchbacks had 3 on target. Like, it's a very, very similar line kind of across the whole thing. And I think the one thing that you could say is that Switchbacks were able to impose a style on the game and say, like, this is how we want this to go, even if it's not necessarily the way that Charleston would typically want to play. They ended up getting in kind of a track meet with Switchbacks, which I think we've been in that situation before where it's like, this isn't the sort of game that you want to get into with Switchbacks, particularly at elevation, at home. But the way in which they do that is they foul a lot. They commit 20 fouls against Charleston, and they turned it into like lot of stop start, like not letting Charleston get any sort of rhythm going. And I think we could be in for a similar game. Like, I mean, we saw Pittsburgh like try to exert a similar style and just like kicking everyone. And
right.
So we could see Switchbacks do a similar thing where it's like, hey, we're going to make this into a little bit, we'll make it a little bit disjointed and we'll want people to rely on, sort of these like this more direct style because it's like, well, we can't play through because we're just getting kicked and like nothing, we're not able to get any momentum going through midfield. So we're just going to kind of play the balls over the top. And ultimately like that is what Switchbacks is going to want to do as well.
Well, if we can get Macaulay King sent off, then by all means, because he's already got a red card to his name, the former Loco. So but yeah, no kidding. Lots of yellow cards as well in this side. So they tend to spread them around. A little rotational fouling, it looks like, but
yeah,
we'll
have to keep an eye on the referee appointment and see who we've got from pro this time around. Yeah, it is a little bit of an interesting one. I think like the thing that Locomotive fans can always rely on though is the fact that the squad will be prepared for Colorado Springs. I think the amount of I don't know if Brian just talks about how much video they are watching more than other coaches, or if they are actually watching more video than other coaches, because he does mention quite a bit like the amount that it impacts like his sleep schedule and stuff like that, and that they are like constantly analyzing their next opponent and like getting a lot of video work in.
I want to say that that's true because in Omaha, a combination of me talking their ears off and them being on their laptops watching video made them almost miss their flight home. So I want to say that it's true. It
is actually impacting their like day to day.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think like the thing that Locomotive fans can certainly rely on is the fact that the team will be well prepared. In terms of like squad and all that stuff, I mean, Mikka, is it safe to say that like we pretty much know the starting 11 and it's just a question, like kind of the weekly question now is like, is Marc Navarro available or not? And that is just like, that's the only real choice that's being made on the team sheet.
Seems that way. Yeah, seems that way. I still feel like maybe there's I don't know, he keeps scoring, so I guess not, but I always, for some reason in my mind, I always think like Ricardo Zacarias' place could be taken. But,
Sure.
I mean, by all means, he's doing the business for us. He's putting the ball in the net, so, and he is becoming a good foil for Lucho Solaniak in the way that Jag can be at times too. So,
yeah,
I mean, yeah, I don't expect anyone to necessarily lose their place against against Colorado over what they did in San Diego. So, a little predictability can be a good thing, and continuity. So
yeah, I do in my mind love the idea of Zacarias being able to come off the bench in Colorado, but I mean, I think you can say the same thing for Gomez in that like his energy off the bench is often a positive influence on proceedings. And I think, in San Diego, we saw like Gomez is, when you want to like go run time off the clock, like he is the guy that you would want to take the ball to the corner because it's so hard to get the damn thing off of him.
Right. The ball sticks for sure.
Yeah. But no, I think there is an interesting point there, but overall maybe the team sheet's a little bit settled, although maybe a question around, and I know obviously we're praising him super duper highly for the goal he scored against Pittsburgh, but Petar Petrovic a little bit quiet in San Diego. Maybe there's a chance to like inject some like fresh legs. Certainly not a comment on like Petar's skill as a player, but maybe giving him a rest might be an opportunity.
Maybe so. Yeah, I looked a little bit jaded coming off. I mean, he did have that one shot, and that's the thing with Petar is like he kind of feels like a player that could make something out of nothing, but like if that doesn't happen, then you wonder maybe where was the contribution coming from. And I think when we saw what he did against Pittsburgh, we were like, okay, this is like the start of something. But we have to come back down to earth and realize we're still learning about this player, right? And
for sure,
it's not like he was bad or anything against San Diego. I just don't think like he had the effect that he wanted to. So yeah, and with Manny coming on and I think doing really quite well in limited minutes, maybe there is a question there about who can play in that wide area, because for sure Kostichin's not getting dropped. I mean, that's our primary playmaker, I think. But I kind of gave Colorado a little bit about the yellow cards, but actually we have quite a handful of folks on 3 already. So I think also like that will become interesting selection wise. I mean, eventually I think we're going to lose somebody to suspension with the way that we get carded, I think pretty frequently and maybe not always fairly, but Bensei, Chapa, Dennis. Chapa, man, like a bit part player already on 3 yellow cards. So Eric Cavillo picked up his 3rd as well. Lucho also on 3. So something that will come up, maybe not in this one, but soon.
Yeah. Is accumulation... I know the rules around accumulation changed like last year, I think. And I can't remember if it's 5 anymore. I think it might actually be 8 yellow cards before
it is. Oh, you're right. Yes. It used to be 5.
Yeah.
But I think it is 8 now.
I think it is
Which
8.
is kind of wild because it's like, that's a lot.
100%. Like,
yeah. Yeah, you're right. It's 8. Okay, well then scratch that.
With that being said, we kind of know the squad that will approach the game against Colorado Springs on Friday, but we certainly don't know like the manner in which they'll approach it, because we've seen so many different looks from the same group of players in this Locomotive side, and credit to Claire out and his staff for finding solutions in tough situations. A big win in San Diego, but one to build on, and hopefully the boys can do that Friday night in Colorado Springs. weren't able to do a watch along for the San Diego game, but I think I would be available for one for Colorado. So
Nice.
hopefully we'll be able to be back for a live watch along there. That will be on Facebook, Twitch, and YouTube. So you guys can check that out on Friday. Just a little bit of alternate commentary, Locomotive bias, instead of listening to the Colorado Springs team. I will say, big improvement this year to Colorado Springs broadcasts will be Brendan Berkey is not the manager anymore, and we won't be able to hear him shouting down the referees over every single foul because of the way that the touchline mics were were set up in past seasons.
No, that's right. It's Stephen Hogan now. So
Yeah.
I don't remember him being nearly as unhinged. So, but we'll see.
Yeah, Berkey, man, really just losing his mind like over every single refereeing decision. And actually sent off in one of our trips last year, I guess our only trip last year, the 4-4 or whatever, he was sent off and then celebrated on the field with the team, which really celebrated the equalizer. Yeah. He celebrated the equalizer, which I was like, man, the league should really do something about this. And then, obviously they didn't. That was the goal scored while Andre Aguiluz was down with a head injury, but,
yeah. Oh my God.
Is what it is. Anyways, not bitter at all. So yeah, check out the watch along so you can listen to us rather than listening to the Colorado Springs broadcast. Yeah, with all that being said, thanks everyone for listening. I hope hopefully you enjoyed the episode, and if you did, drop a like, follow, subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Seriously Loco. And I guess we will talk during the game on Friday. But until then, hope everyone has a good week and stay loco.